Swagatam, Namaskaram, welcome. Jai Hind, Vande Matram. In this video, we shall take up for our discussion, thinking, analysis, examination, or what have you, of a significant statement or part of the Prime Minister's Independence Day address to the nation, issued from the historic ramparts of the Delhi Red Fort. In that speech, the Prime Minister exhorted the youth of India, by implication the cockroaches of India, to desist from becoming Dimagi-Naxals by developing their power of thought. The second thing he did was, he activated intolerance in the wider society as a whole, towards those who, according to him, are Dimagi-Naxals, that is, young people who are given to thinking for themselves, which is characteristic of the present generation, the Gen Z, and to be utterly non-cooperative with them, to isolate them, to neutralize them. So a clear polarization between the thinking part of the society and the non-thinking part of the society. A clear division between the blind followers, andh bhakts, and free thinkers. And this is clearly what the Prime Minister has stated, and I don't think he will quarrel with my understanding of what he has actually stated. It is part of the public record. So now our attempt, in the sense that he is stated in public as an address to the nation, we have every right, indeed the duty, to understand what it actually means and also to examine the likely implications thereof. It's part of our duties as citizens. So what is this exhortation, this very emphatic exhortation by the Prime Minister to the society as a whole, imply for the whole of India? This is a very serious theme, and I know it's also a sensitive topic, and therefore, contrary to my practice, I have written out almost 90% of my text, and I will adhere verbatim to my text to make sure that even unwittingly I do not say anything which is likely to unnecessarily hurt the sentiments of anyone, particularly the self-appointed deshbhakts, who look at everybody else with suspicion, distrust, and hostility. Now, what will be the implication if the country were to take the Prime Minister's advice seriously and disincentivize thinking and discourage it, especially in young people and in the generations that follow? Clearly, we will be devastating the human and humane foundations of our national life. Let me explain. There is no thinker in human history that I am familiar with who does not say, either directly or indirectly, that to be human is to think. To be human is to think. It's not only René Descartes, the French philosopher, who said it. He said it in a very crisp and unforgettable manner. Cogito ergo sum. I think, therefore I exist. And therefore, a person who does not think, does not even exist, is a pale shadow who doesn't merit any attention, who has no relevance, no value, no worth. So that is the outcome if the exhortation by the Prime Minister is taken seriously and followed up. Now, what does it mean to be human? I said a short while ago that if the Prime Minister's advice is taken seriously and implemented, it will devastate the human foundation of our existence. And therefore, naturally, the question arises, what does it mean to be human? I'm sure all of us are interested in knowing the answer to that question. What does it mean to be human? We're all human beings, and therefore, it's not a waste of time to try and find out what it means to be human. To be very simple and clear, let me use a pattern. It's not my pattern. It's a pattern that was introduced by the Greek thinkers. Almost every thinker, every Greek philosopher takes this pattern for granted. They say to be human includes three parts. Very easy to remember. I read it a long while ago, maybe about 40 years ago. Still, that's very clear in my mind because it's so easy to remember. Three words. Remember three words. Feeling, thinking, willing. To be human is to feel, it is to think, it is to will. To will is also to act. It begins as a sentiment. Then you think about the sentiment, and based on the nature of your thinking, your will decides either to act on it or not to act on it. So this is how human beings live. Now, the Prime Minister is saying, do not think at all. So what does it mean? Now, the simple fact of the matter is that if you weaken the thinking part, the thinking quotient, the other two dimensions also will be weakened. So we will become feeble in our feeling as well as ineffectual or paralyzed in our acting, in our doing. And I don't have to say this to you, that the outcome will be disastrous. So let's understand this very clearly. Now, let's focus for a little while on thinking. Animals are very limited in their capacity to think. They're not altogether incapable of thinking, but the range of their thinking is very limited. And therefore, they also lack emotional richness. And it's because the animals lack the sort of emotional richness that we have, that animals do not have any art forms. They're not mindful of the need to perfect their forms of self-expression. Therefore, that which is characteristically human is involved here, and therefore we can't afford to be indifferent to this. The second point, if you don't think for yourself, you will be an object that will be used at will by others. Your will to act will be hijacked by others. In other words, in simple terms, you will become a tool in the hands of others. It's very convenient for them, but it's extremely bad for you. So, freedom has two parts. One, the will to do. Now, if you have certain ideas and you want to bring them into practice, you have to do according to your ideas. Now, freedom is the freedom to do, but freedom is also the freedom to not do. Not do what others want you to do if that is not acceptable to you. If you don't have the freedom to say no to what others are forcing you to do, then you are not a free person, you are a slave. And a person whose thinking capacity is not developed will not be able to say no to anyone, and therefore he or she will end up as a tool conveniently and complacently used by every Tom, Dick and Harry who has the unconscionable intention to make use of such individuals, fellow human beings, as convenient tools. The third point, the erosion of our thinking and willing capacities will also impoverish our feeling, or what's called the emotional quotient. A lot has been said about these things, therefore I don't think I need to pause for any explanation. So the outcome of criminalizing thinking in our society, particularly thinking in relation to the young people, Gen Z, will be an absolute unthinkable disaster for India. It is not too much to expect of a Prime Minister, the Prime Minister of the foremost functioning democracy in the world, to have at least this much common sense. That is, the common sense to understand the far-reaching consequences of what he himself is saying after enough deliberation, forethought, etc. So these are not casual statements. These are all calculated, calibrated statements, and a lot of forethought has gone into it. So it's deliberate, and therefore there is no excuse of ignorance. Now, so the outcome of this advocacy on the part of the Prime Minister is that we will create, if at all we proceed on this, we'll create a nation of mental slaves and human vegetables. It may temporarily serve the fleeting convenience of a self-seeking leader, but it will be enormously harmful to the country, both now and in the generations to follow. Consider just one example. One of the major engines that drive the prosperity of America and indeed all developed countries is quality higher education imparted through their very distinguished universities. We know that annually tens and thousands of Indian youth migrate to these countries to study in their universities. Now, what is the function of a university? The function of the university is to equip people to think. So if you don't think differently, you will not invent. You will not innovate. It's as simple as that. So the certainty of progress depends almost entirely on the quality of freedom of thought obtained in a society. You can't create an oppressive authoritarian society and express that society to progress after killing the capacity to think. So, to take an example, we today travel by airlines. Who invented the aircraft, aeroplanes? The Wright brothers. Now, whether Modi likes it or not, the Wright brothers were Dimagi-Naxals. They thought contrary to their own father. The father of the Wright brothers was a bishop. He was appalled at the thought that his sons were working on inventing a machine that could fly, because the father bishop said, if God had meant human beings to fly, he would have fitted them with wings. So it's against the will of God that you try to invent this mechanism that can fly. They were Dimagi-Naxals. Today we are able to fly. Prime Minister Modi has 2 jazzy Boeing 777s at his disposal. Prime Minister Modi doesn't realize that that is the blessing contributed to humanity by the erstwhile Dimagi-Naxals. It's as simple as that. Everything that the Prime Minister uses has come into being because of the Dimagi-Naxals in the previous generation. So the significant thing to note is this. This posturing on the part of the Prime Minister is truly consistent with the Modi government's negativity, indeed hostility towards education. The worth of an individual, as you will see very easily for yourself if you for a moment pluck the courage to think for yourself, the worth of an individual depends very substantially, if not entirely, on his or her capacity to think. Now, Amartya Sen is valued 1,000 times more than I am, not because he is more handsome than I am, which he may or may not be, but because the quality of his thinking is way higher than mine. And if Amartya Sen and Narendra Modi are kept on the same platform and made to be judged by an international jury, Amartya Sen will outwit him by a good English mile. Again, the one thing, quality of thinking, quality of the mind. It is as clear as noonday. And it is this tremendous national treasure that our Prime Minister says we must ruin and destroy forever. Now, consider the ironic similarity between what the Prime Minister said at the Independence Day's message to the nation and what the British Raj thought about what they should do for Indian youth. The British Raj, the white man who ruled us, whose victims we were, till we were liberated by a great galaxy of leaders led by Mahatma Gandhi. And that galaxy did not include Veer Savarkar or Narendra Modi. So the great leaders who led us to freedom were great thinkers also. And they became aware of the need to liberate India because they thought for the people of India. But the colonizers did not have to think for the people of India, and therefore they were very, very suspicious of the desirability of imparting higher education to Indians, the natives as we were called then. So they actually feared that if higher education is popularized and the native Indians are equipped with the tools of thought, it could actually demolish the foundation of the British Raj. So developing the thinking capacity of the colonized people was clearly feared to be harmful to the interests of the colonizing master. And you will easily be persuaded of this if you look into the history of the great debate on education that happened, and that not merely involving the Macaulay Minute and the rest of it. The great Orientalists and the progressive thinkers on two sides. Now, in this context, recall for a moment Prime Minister Modi's very hostile stand against Macaulay. You remember he made a very significant speech which became the topic of discussion by the Indian media for a few days. He said, Lord Macaulay did enormous harm to the Indian mind. He colonized our mind, and therefore he ruined and suppressed all our native potential. But strangely, our Prime Minister wants to do the same thing that he accuses of Lord Macaulay doing. Now, even the Babus under the British Raj had to think. Of course, they were free to think only as the master wanted them to think. At least they were free to think. But now the master of New India says, do not think at all. So that is, the wheel has come full circle. Now, let's consider what happens when we kill the thinking capacity or the intellectual quotient of our people. I'll be very brief about this. I have a lot to say in this, therefore I'll have to rush. If a man does not think of his own free will, then he becomes a mindless consumer of the opinions manufactured by others. You can't think for yourself, therefore you have to swallow the opinions generated and popularized or broadcast by others. So in effect it means, do not think, we will think for you, and then we will tell you what to think. And the outcome can only be abject slavery of the mind. So the envisaged end product is the total colonization of the mind, which even the British Raj did not aim at. After all, a luminary like the Nobel laureate Rabindranath Tagore, our beloved Gurudev, is a product of that time. I mean, think of someone today writing a poem like Gitanjali Hymn 35, where the mind is without fear and the head is held high, where knowledge is free, where the clear stream of reason has not lost its way into the dreary desert sand of dead habit, goes on and on and on, then concludes into that heaven of freedom, freedom, my father, not my mother, my father, let my country awake. Do you think such a poem will be written today? It's an ironic reflection of the kind of intellectual freedom that was available under the British Raj. Whereas when Modi looks at that period, it's a very bad period in our history. I'm ashamed of that period myself, but compared to what is being advocated today, it's a very shocking realization for me. So, the second point in this context. A second terrifying consequence of what the Prime Minister has advocated in this respect will be that individuals will become slaves of their own instincts. Apart, as a short while ago I said, they'll only degenerate into being mindless consumers of the opinions manufactured by others. You see, anybody who has written about personality development, about character formation, has also written a lot about how the human instincts need to be refined, controlled, and guided by higher influences. And those higher influences come from the mind, the education of the mind. So instincts can be controlled and guided purposefully only if the mind is developed. That's the reason why all the spiritual gurus in history taught. Clearly, you know, when somebody teaches you, they're touching your mind. They're asking you to develop your thinking capacity. Whether it be Lord Krishna, the great Gitanjali, what is Lord Krishna doing in Gitanjali? Is he not refining the mind of Arjuna? Is not Lord Krishna going by Narendra Modi's category, Dimagi-Naxal, in relation to Arjuna who thinks otherwise? So Lord Krishna or Guru Nanak or Lord Buddha, or in Kerala's context Narayana Guru, or Jesus Christ, or the Prophet of Islam, they were all challenging people to think and think differently. So they can all be called Dimagi-Naxals. But the Prime Minister must realize that humankind, the human family, Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, the human family progresses only because of the so-called Dimagi-Naxals and not because of andh. The difference between them and the difference between these great spiritual luminaries who taught humankind and our present-day demagogues is, one, the spiritual luminaries taught to liberate our mind so that our mental powers can guide, refine, and control our instincts meaningfully and purposefully. Whereas our demagogues today teach, they teach a great deal. So our demagogues teach in order to colonize our mind. Spiritual gurus taught to liberate our mind. The demagogues of today teach us in order to colonize and control our mind. That's the difference. You decide for yourself which is better. If Gandhi, Ambedkar, Nehru, and Patel could not think, our plight would have been very different. And still, Narendra Modi says, do not think. Do not think. A pertinent question arises at this point, a question that let's have the courage to address to our Prime Minister. So I'm going to formulate the question as follows. Dear Modi ji, why do you conduct Man Ki Baat? Man Ki Baat, mind you, Man Ki Baat. It is not bottom ki baat. It is not, feet ki baat. Man ki baat. Man ki baat. Why do you conduct Man ki baat? Is it to enlighten our children and youth, or is it to suppress their thinking? Please come clear on this. What is your intention in conducting this monthly, highly planned, well orchestrated exercise called Man Ki Baat? Now, third point. The Prime Minister's outlook signals utter intolerance towards two things. One, diversity, and dissent. If people think for themselves, two things happen. One, there will be a diversity of opinions, diversity of views. Second, naturally there will be dissent. If you and I think, and we think according to our own development, our own quality of experience, our range of exposure, etc., then the outcomes of our thinking are bound to be different. So the Prime Minister is also advocating intolerance toward diversity and dissent. Thinking necessarily generates both dissent and diversity. So this stand of the Prime Minister is in tune with the Sangh agenda of homogenizing India by suppressing diversity. It's not an accidental statement. It's not a casual statement. And it also is serving notice against the political diversity in India, concretized by the various opposition parties. So one after the other, the opposition parties must be eliminated. Opposition Mukt Bharat, opposition party number 1 gone, number 2 gone, number 3 gone, number 4 gone. Ultimately, one party will be left. Now, if that is the final outcome envisaged, then criminalizing thinking is a necessary input into the grand, shall I say, dish that's being cooked. Now, consider this very interesting fact. Modi's hostility to individuals using their Dimagi-Naxals contradicts what he himself recommends to the country in the very same speech. What does he say? He says, do not think for yourself, think only for the country. Either way, it is thinking, my dear Prime Minister. How can the young people think for the country if thinking is a criminal activity, and by thinking they become Dimagi-Naxals? So, the Prime Minister is clearly not aware of this self-contradiction, because, ironically, he is advocating it only thinking for himself. So even while he is recommending to the youth of India this high ideal of not thinking for themselves but thinking only for the country, the Prime Minister is clearly thinking only for himself. And he is asking the youth to think only for the country because he thinks only for himself. It's a very interesting situation, isn't it? How can the youth of India think for the country if their capacity to think is killed? So Modi is in fact saying, don't think at all, but think for the country. Whether that is feasible or not, you decide for yourself. My job is only to analyze what actually the advocacy means and implies. And it is because Modi thinks only for himself that he forbids the youth to think for themselves. Fifth point. But the Prime Minister is unhappily unaware of this glaring self-contradiction. Why is he unaware of this glaring? It's not hidden. It is not subtle. It's very crude. It is broad. It's glaring. Self-contradiction. Why is he unaware of this? Because he does not think in a holistic manner. He does not think in a connected manner. The characteristic, the quality of a mature mind is its ability to synthesize thought. That is, various ingredients of thought are held together in the mind. If you imagine the mind as a crucible, as T.S. Eliot says, human mind must be thought of as a crucible into which various elements of thought are free to enter and form various permutations and combinations. But our Prime Minister is not aware of the mind as a crucible which contains and must contain all these ideas together so that they interact among themselves and create a consistent output. He goes by piecemeal, and therefore he is bound to lack consistency in his advocacies, in his thinking. And that happens because the Prime Minister seems to be driven entirely by expediency. And expediencies are never constant, they keep shifting, they keep changing. What is expedient now may be very inexpedient tomorrow. You also change your way and you begin to say exactly the opposite thing as compared to what you said today. So expediencies keep shifting. So what is convenient in the given context is advocated, is aired, without minding that it contradicts what has been said even a brief while before. And clearly this is a trait that he shares with his most favorite journalist, Arnab Goswami. Let me give you a personal experience. In 2012, a great controversy broke out in St. Stephen's, and unfortunately, I happened to be the principal. The controversy was about a young man called Unmukh Chand, who was the captain of India and under-19 team, which won the world championship at that time. Now, the problem was that Unmukh Chand did not attend a single day's classwork. His attendance was 0. So, as per the rules of Delhi University, he could not write the examination. The principal of a college, according to the Delhi University Act, does not have the discretionary power to condone attendance beyond 33%. That power is only with the Vice Chancellor of the university. So when I processed this matter, obviously I refused the admission ticket, examination admission ticket to Unmukh Chand. It became a great controversy. All the media men began to scream at me, saying that I'm a tyrant, I'm a dictator, whereas I was simply following the law of the land. So Arnab Goswami sought an interview with me. His Nation Wants to Know program. I consented to participate. So the program was about to begin. I was hooked up and everything is ready. And unfortunately for him, I happened to see 5 minutes of the previous program. The previous program, he was lambasting a politician, at that time a Congress minister, because it was the UPA government, for breaking some rules. He was literally tearing him to bits and pieces. So the poor man looked like a frightened mouse in front of Arnab Goswami. Anyway, that program ended, and soon my segment started. And he started with me. He said, why are you tormenting a promising cricketer who brought honor and glory to India? I asked him a simple question. I said, Arnab, just 2 minutes ago, you were tearing a central minister for violating the rules. Now you're attacking me for upholding the rules. I said, you make up your mind where you stand. Believe you me, Arnab Goswami was stunned into silence. And he never asked me a question thereafter. That is the problem. It's a very terrible disease. But you have to be intellectually alert to discover this epidemic in our midst. So, now consider the Vande, please bear with me a little more. I know that time is getting out of hand. Now consider the Vande Matram controversy as an illustration alone. This song is a glorious product of the enlightened thinking of a great creative genius called Bankim Chandra Chatterjee, whose novel Ananth I have read with great interest a couple of times. Bankim Chandra Chatterjee also was, in the eyes of the British Raj, a Dimagi-Naxal. India's freedom fighters, all of them, Gandhi included, were Dimagi-Naxals from the point of view of the British Raj. The non-Dimagi Indians, the safe Indians, or Indians who took the safe path, in the good books of the British Raj, were the predecessors of the present Sangh, including Veer Savarkar, who offered with his followers to be collaborators with the colonial masters. So if you don't think independently, you become collaborators with the colonial master. Okay? So Vande Matram, the national song about which Modi, Amit Shah, BJP, Sangh Parivar are all striking up very inspiring and impressive postures of nationalistic fervor. The Vande Matram is entirely a Congress legacy to the political India, even if the party did not write the lyric. It was the Congress party that identified Vande Matram with the guidance of Gurudev Tagore, who set it to music. It was not by Veer Savarkar or Hindu Mahasabha or any of the predecessors of the present stalwarts and the Sangha Parivar. It's a purely Congress legacy. And that legacy is now sought to be hijacked by the BJP. In technical language, this is called freebooting. Freebooting, I don't have the time to explain that to you, but please take note of this. This particular strategy is called freebooting. F-R-E-E hyphen booting. B-O-O-T-I-N-G. Freebooting. The BJP has already freebooted in relation to Sardar Patel, in relation to B.R. Ambedkar, so on and so forth. So, this being the historical reality, namely the Vande Matram is a Congress legacy to India. What is BJP led by Amit Shah and Modi doing? They are trying to convert the last two stanzas of Vande Matram into a beating stick against Congress. It was agreed by all the leaders of India that the last two stanzas of Vande Matram, there are 6 stanzas in all. Please read the translation into English of Vande Matram by Sri Aurobindo. I consider that to be the best. The last 2 stanzas were deliberately left out because Gandhi in particular felt that this song, which is a song that calls all Indians to unity, to acquire this oneness of mind, should not have anything in it which is divisive. And insofar as the last 2 stanzas have obvious religious, that is Hindu coloring, they realized, they were large-hearted enough to realize that there could be a point of offense to the Muslims. Whether it should be so or not, I have my opinions. I may include those opinions in another video. This is not the occasion for it. So, it was by common consent that the last 2 stanzas of Vande Matram were omitted. Now, of course, it has been made mandatory, and based on that, a new offense is being generated. So, therefore, consider this most ironic thing. The last 2 stanzas of Vande Matram have become a stick with which to beat Congress, whereas the song itself is a Congress legacy to India. Clearly, what the BJP values most is that part of the song, the last 2 stanzas, and not really Vande Matram in terms of what the song advocates, embodies, and wants to instill into the Indian mind. The reason is only too obvious. Understandably, this part of the Prime Minister's speech has attracted wide international attention and a great deal of hostile reactions. And clearly, and I've been sampling reactions, it has become a point of embarrassment felt keenly by the vast Indian diaspora. The image of India abroad has taken a severe beating. Jai Hind. Vande Matram.